delighted that we have an opportunity to hear Brother Arnold talk about the life of Mother Ann Lee in honor of her birthday. She was a leap day baby, so we tried to do something special this time of the year for her. And he also will talk about his experience living the life of a Shaker. So enjoy. At the end of his talk, we will have some time for questions from the audience.
Thank you, Starlin. Appreciate it. And thank you all for having us. Nice pan of all of you. So anyways, I'm sorry for the delay, and I was in the wrong hangout room, it turns out, but that's technology for you. I'm here today to talk to you about our ever blessed mother. And there's a song which starts out, how much are they, well, not starts out, but in part of it says, how much are they deceived who think that mother's dead? She lives among her offspring who just begin to spread. And being at this moment the last outpost of Shakerism here in the wilds of Maine, where it is snowing, by the way, in this perpetual winter that we seem to be a part of, we look with anticipation to spring, and with spring also the anticipation of Mother's birthday. And before that, actually, on the 28th, we will celebrate the birthday of Father James. And then it'll be on March 1st where we will commemorate the birthday of Mother. And who is this woman who we call our mother in the new creation? Well, Ann Lee was born in the second largest city in England, Manchester, during a great time of religious upheaval. And it was actually in Manchester, there in the north, where you see so much freedom being exercised, because it's so far away from the center of both the monarchy as well as the ecclesiastical authority, that it's the place where the first Unitarian chapel is. It's where you see Methodism taking on a very, very strong and very early presence. And all of those who will later on identify themselves as Shakers were, in fact, Methodists. Mother herself speaks of very, very few ecclesiastical types, and one of them was Isaac Watts, and the other one was George Whitefield, of whom she was a hearer. And when you start to read the testimonies, you begin to understand much more how important that beginning was. The evangelical fervor that was a part of those first Methodists was something that became very, very ingrained in those people who came out from that, and in 1747 formed their own church. Now I'm going to ask you guys a question right now, not to be answered until the end if you can, but tell me who, and start to think about this, who was the first Shaker? I'm going to tell you one thing right away, it was not Mother Ann, because you have to remember in 1747 she was 11 years old. So you have to think about it. Anyways, so here comes this woman, and one of many, many in a family, the daughter of a blacksmith, and we also have to start to think about something else too. People want to believe many wrong ideas about Shakers. One of them was that the first generation of believers were desperately poor. Well, they weren't. They were all part of an artisan middle class. They were weavers, they were blacksmiths, they were shoemakers, and in some cases they were actually rather wealthy, like the Hocknells, who were landed gentry. And so it was in this context of people that this evangelical fervor comes about. It's a newspaper reporter who actually gives us a name in 1758 of the Shaking Quakers. Now, the Shakers were never, ever associated with the Quakers. That form of Quakerism, which gave them their make-fun-of name, was a whole generation beforehand. And that comes down to the fact that they knew, that is to say this person from the Manchester Mercury, knew that we weren't Quakers. So he thought we shook rather than quaked. God alone knows what the difference is in that, but he saw the difference. Anyways, it's a name that stuck. What did we call ourselves? We called ourselves then the Church. And it was only later on. Steve, would you stop laughing, please? Just because Lenny walked by. Anyways, so the Church didn't find a need to call itself anything other than the Church. It was mostly applicable to them. It worked for them. And what was important to them was the working of the Spirit. Coming into that church comes this young woman named Ann Lee. Now, Mother Ann was going to go through a lot of suffering. She was actually already in the midst of it. She had a great deal of upheaval in her life. It seemed to have affected her entire psyche. And so it was after these things that are going on, she was one of the loudest, most vocal, most physical of all of those first believers. And she, with her father, are the ones who basically mastermind breaking into divine service at Christ's church and calling them all the whores of Babylon, etc., not winning too many friends. And in fact, for all of her troubles, she got thrown into jail. And it was really during that time period where you start to see the formulation of her understanding of Christ. Now, there are a lot of people who will also tell you that the Shakers believe that we feel that Mother Ann is the physical second appearance of Christ. Now, I'm not going to say to you that some of the first believers probably didn't believe that, but that's not what Mother herself believed, and it's not what Mother taught. And it's not what, in general, the church believed and continues to hold to be the truth. It's rather that, as Mother would tell you, it is the Christ within me, and it is the fullness of that Christ life and the Christ spirit that we as Shakers come to understand Mother as having. That's what she taught us. That's what she taught us to evolve to, and possibly and hopefully to start to develop more fully into our own individual daily lives. So what happens is she comes out of jail, she goes to the society, and she announces these revelations. Now, in the revelation, that time, that's when she is denoted our mother in the new creation. It's also a time, that's when celibacy gets introduced to the community. It wasn't before then. And it is also when a great falling away occurs because of this kind of fervor, and it's because of their expectation on a greater cross. And it was also during this time they were very lucky that John Townley, who was a very wealthy Mason, took most of them in Manchester. Now, the persecutions continued on, and they decided to exit Manchester. And a small group of them, the inner core, as it were, decide to all go to America. Now, most likely what really precipitated this exit was the fact that John Townley had lost faith and he kicked them all out of his house, and they needed a place in which to live. So it's decided to try out America. And if any of you have ever been to Manchester, England, you will know there was probably no way they could lose, because that was about as horrible a place to live in as possible. So anyways, they come to America knowing no one. They have a kind of prophetic type of voyage in which it seems that they are going to be lost at sea. And for two reasons. One, because Mother's so vocal and she keeps telling the seamen how wicked they are, and to the point where the captain threatens to throw them overboard, to the storm that comes up and knocks a plank out. And it's at that time when Mother says not to fear, that everything was going to be all right. She saw an angel. And shortly thereafter, the plank gets back in, they're saved, and they arrive in America. Well, they know no one. And yet, with the power of God in her, as she always felt she had. This is not a woman who saw anything except in very black terms and very white terms. She had no gray in her life at all. And she marched right up Queen Street. She knocks on the door of a woman and she says, "We are the people of God, take us in." Now, of course, we all know what would happen today if we did that, but that didn't happen to them, very fortunately, and they were taken in. And so they start a little life in New York, some of them. The others go upriver to Niskayuna, where they purchase land, start draining off the swamps, and start to build a life. Now, they were not living communally at this point, but rather they're scattered. Father William goes into Albany and is employed as a blacksmith. Father James goes into Albany and he's employed as a weaver. And Mother Ann and Abraham Standron, her husband, stayed in New York City. Then he leaves her and she's left alone. And this is where the testimonies are not perhaps always accurate. Because if we believe the testimonies, it says that she had nothing. She was reduced to a cruel of vinegar to drink and a stone for a pillow. But at the same time, she still managed to have enough money to go up and down the river to visit the believers in Albany. So, I mean, there's a little discrepancy there, but it's for cause and effect. And it doesn't really alter the story ultimately, but it does show that by Christmas of 1776, all of them are reunited, and they stay there and they form the first community. And it is from that point where we start to see everything coalesce. She builds up the faith of believers who are also being tested, because for once Mother Ann, instead of being so vocal and so in your face, stays away from churches, stays away from people. And because of the time period, they're so English and they have such different views on life, they knew to stay quiet. And all of that gets changed in 1780 on May 19th, with the famous dark day, in which it seemed that in New England and New York State, the sun was not seen to rise or set. And so everyone thought, this is it, folks. This is the millennium. It is started. And with that, the Shakers get discovered. And Mother decides very quickly that she's going on a missionary tour with her inner circle. The others would stay at Waterville to entertain the people who might come there and to maintain the home and the farm, and the others would go out with her. And it was at this time where we see both Mother's tremendous faith, and also we see the life ebb out of her, because that commitment to faith brought her into conflict with the Congregational Church, who were the leading and ruling authorities of New England. And so Mother was at various times whipped, dragged, stoned, imprisoned, and otherwise beaten and humiliated, because the things that were being said about her were, first of all, no woman could ever act the way she did, so she was actually a man in disguise. And so she would be physically stripped to prove that she was a woman. She was a spy, obviously, because she was British, and she was trying to undermine the American Revolution because she was a pacifist. And then she was a witch, that she had actually been tried in England and there were holes bored through her tongue, etc. All these kinds of things, and yet each and every time and at every stage, it was proved to be false. But her enemies were very strong, and the opposition was so strong that it remained for probably 2 generations things that you would still hear in back rooms and around a Shaker, in the towns around a Shaker community. But here is a woman who met the literal thousands of people who came to see her as individuals. She was charismatic, and today I don't think we really have enough. All right, I'm back.
Okay. Bye. Bye now.
Bye. So here we go again, folks. I don't know how long, so we're going to make this real fast, all right? One deep breath, and here we go. But anyway, so I have no idea where we lost each other, but the missionary journey was the most important thing that Mother Ann did, because people got to meet her, and literally thousands got to meet her, good, bad, or indifferent. And it was her personal charism that brought people into that faith and made them stay Shakers, really, through all the adversity, through the very beginnings and through the whole of their lives, and be able to carry it on to the 2nd generation, 3rd generations, and 4th generations. And Mother Ann still remains strong and central to the life of all the thousands of people, of all the theologians, of all of the great thinkers, or whatever else that have joined. It's Mother who holds it all together, and always has. She's the heart, the mind, and the soul of the church. And so it's very easy for people outside, I think, to start to think that the Shakers worship her, which we don't. But her dictums, her sensible teaching, her immediacy of faith, these are all things that still resonate within the church because they are still the truth. And when it's the truth, it will always be the truth. And for us, that's what Shakerism is about. It is the life of Christ. And she exemplified that life. So in her inner core, those who traveled with her, everyone was celibate. Everyone lived a communal life in emulation of Christ. And right from the very beginning, we were pacifists, part of that greater peace movement, because we believe in that. And also, with that comes the equality. And it was really across the board, equality of all and for all. And what first got them in trouble was, of course, that women were equal to men. And then the next thing that they have to deal with when Americans start to come along with that is the different races and finding them to all to be equal. And yet in Shaker life, all become equal. All our brothers, all our sisters. And we look in the world as being one, created by our Father, Mother God, and therefore we are all equal. So, What else do I want to say about Mother? I just want to say that it's the reason we still celebrate her birthday is in that emulation. We'll come together. We will share that life together, our favorite sayings, those things that we still read. Every Shaker always has a book, the testimonies that are right there by their bed that they can access at any time they wish to. The people I knew from the generation before me all would quote those things in sort of a daily work. There are a couple of expressions that seem to go around, and the most common of them is hands to work and hearts to God. And I don't think most people understand how important that expression is, because it's like simple gifts. It's overplayed and overused. But think about it, folks. It means that whatever you do, it's a potential of being an act of worship, because they have to be conjoined. Whatever work we do, and I'm not so stupid as to trying to make you people even believe me that every time I have to go and sweep out the barn floor that I'm doing it and thinking how I'm serving God, because I'm not. But I should be. And that's something to aspire to, that everything is necessary in the community for its running, and therefore it really is potentially, because you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for a greater whole and a greater good. And in so doing, whatever task it is, it's a brilliant concept in the community, because it eliminates really that anybody's over anybody else. And believe me, there's nothing more humbling than having to be in a community, because you try to get yourself up there, there's three people who will knock you right back down in place. So the humility of the life of a believer is something that is very practical. And that's the thing about Mother Ann. She was very practical. She wasn't lofty. If people dared come to her and would try to kneel down before her, she'd kneel with them and say, don't kneel to me, kneel to God. And in all things, she was out there working. She washed dishes, and she set the table herself, and she cooked, and she swept the dooryard, and at the same time, she preached, she admonished, she loved, she cared, and she brought in thousands of people. And so that's where we miss the charism, because by her very arm lifted up, she could take an entire meeting and bring them up to the heights of heaven. And at the same time, she could yell, and it would bring them down to the depths of hell. So that kind of spirit is something that really doesn't go away. It's something that lingers in monastic memory. It's something that continues to play a force and play an important central part in our daily lives. I think that's all I'm going to say. So before we lose the connection, do we have any questions?
Does anyone have questions at this point? Yeah. We have somebody asking about her death and the circumstances of that and where she died.
Mother Ann? All right, so what happened was, I know you were all at Waterville and Starlin, I don't want to, decry your importance there, but the thing is, that's not really where Mother intended to die. Her center was Harvard, and the square house was always called Mother's House, and she paid for it herself. So the center of operations for her were going to be moved down. But she leaves Harvard when all of the persecutions, she's coming back visiting everybody, goes back home to Waterville, and then Father William dies. And when he dies in July, she starts to decline very quickly herself. And so by September, in fact September 8th, she dies. And there was no visible outward signs of why she was dying, but after they had exhumed the body many years later, they found a fractured skull. And that's probably from one of the times she was dragged down the stairs. She fractured her skull. So she had a slow and lingering kind of death. She did die at Waterville, and she was buried at Waterville, but with Father William and William Bixby, who was a young believer. However, the community didn't actually end up living there in that particular land. So later on, they exhume her and bring her into the present cemetery and make her the center of that cemetery. And the reason she has the taller stone is because to denote her importance in the community. It should have been more or less the end of the Shakers, they used to think, because when you have a new religion and the founder dies, it tends to set everything in disarray. But there were enough of that inner core there who could lead, and indeed did lead, so that they could spread the message out.
Were there a few others?
I know the social belief is in celibacy, but was that ever thought about for the future benefit of the society, that if there are no children, how do you continue to have your society go on from year to year and remain in place?
Well, not the first time we've been asked that question, but but the thing is that monasticism has been around for thousands of years. And you look at St. Catherine's in Sinai, and that's always been a celibate community of monks, and yet it's been there for nearly 1,000 years. It's not for us to water down the gospel. And Christ was celibate, and we're celibate, and that's the way it's going to stay, because we feel it's a higher calling. It's not meant for everyone. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? We don't know. I would say that, of course, if you look at it from nuts and bolts, there's 3 Shakers right now, and that might be the end. Well, I don't believe that. It's not my hope, it's not our prayer, and it's not our daily prayer. And so we still continue to have vocations come in. Yep, you're right, that's Sister Frances in the background, standing there, and now leaving. She doesn't really understand new technology, folks, so she can't get over she thinks it's a telephone interview we're having. Anyways, so I'm sorry I'm laughing, that just seemed to be juxtaposition of what I was saying, so funny. But we live in the hope and the expectation that there will yet be Shakers that will continue to come in and populate this village and keep it going. And that is our hope as well as our prayer. So as for the children thing never really worked for the Shakers. If you take a look at how many tens of thousands of children were adopted, yet let's look at how many of them ever stayed. And not only that, but it's just if we look at the adults, they, in the aggregate, they don't die here either. So there really are very few in the percentage of any generation who are going to come in who will actually be buried in the cemetery.
Okay, now I have a question here, and I'll get back over this way too.
Yes, Brother Arnold, you just started talking about my question, which is in part how you came to be a believer and really what you all hope is the future of the Sabbath-day Lake community and of the Shakers as a group.
Well, I first came here the day after Thanksgiving in 1974. I had been writing to the community since 1973. Definitely a child of the 70s and was interested in communal life, and so I think that, as I always say, Brother Ted was sick and tired of answering my letters, and he just said, well, why don't you just come up and see it for yourself? So I did. And it was a weekend that transformed me and changed my life, but not in a way I knew at the time. I fell in love with this place and worship and all of the people, but I had no intentions of being a Shaker then. I just knew I wanted to come back and to help them out as any way I could. And so for 3 years I visited. And it was really in the end of that third year, Brother Ted started having a series of what he would call serious, mature, adult conversations. And tell me that it seemed like you've been hanging around a little too long, and you've got to do one thing or the other. And so I thought about it and asked, and they accepted me to come in as a novice, and I came in January of 1978. And I've been trying the life ever since. And what is the hope in the future of the community? Well, our hope is that there will always be Shakers here. I don't foresee that it was ever going to be a large community again, but I think that there are always people called in every generation. And it's just our duty to kind of find those people who are actually called to live this life.
Okay, we have another question here.
I was just wondering if you could talk for a moment about your lifestyle in the community there.
Sure. Don't leave yet, because I need something a little more specific about the lifestyle.
Could you explain to us what your day is like?
Chaos, punctuated by prayer. Well, we rise at different times now, but between 6 and 7, everyone gets up. We all say our private prayers in our rooms. Then the great bell rings at 7:30 in the morning to announce breakfast. We all eat together. And after breakfast is over, the tables are cleared, and then we have the first communal prayer service of the day, usually around 8 o'clock. And that rotates among the members of the community who lead it. And that lasts about a half an hour. Then we all go off to our chores. I go to the barn. Sisters are cooking. There's cleaning. May have to deal with some guests, business, going to town to run errands, mowing the lawns, whatever it is. Then we meet together at 11:30 for brief prayers. We dine, have our large meal at noontime, go back to work in the afternoons. Then we have supper at 5:30, and generally the evenings are free. On Wednesday nights we have what we call a reading meeting, in which we examine old documents of the church and read them together and talk about how relevant they are to today in our lives and looking at the past and all of that. And otherwise, we have a sitting room, we have a television, we take 3 daily newspapers, we have journals you can read, knit, work, catch up on things, whatever you need to do, and usually around 9 o'clock, retire. Sundays are the one day of the week we do no unnecessary work, trying to hold that on to the Sabbath as much as possible. And the one service of the week that's open to the outside world is held then at 10 o'clock. We have meeting either right now at this time of the year here in the dwelling house, when the weather's good over in the meeting house.
I think there's a question on the other side of the room over here.
Yeah, I'm curious. You described a couple of characteristics of Mother Ann, grounded and sensible, and you described her activities, her proselytizing. That leads me to 2 questions. I'm assuming that you're sensible and grounded, and you look around yourselves, and you're a limited number of people. To what extent do you temper your hope that there will always be a Shaker community with the reality, the apparent reality, that the Shaker community might be coming to an end within the next 20 years? That's the first question. How do you process the possibility that your community may no longer, you may be the last of the community? That's the first question. The second is there any activity that the 3 of you engage in that would resemble proselytizing? Are you trying to keep that hope alive by engaging in spreading the word and getting new members?
I understand everything you had to say, and it's not that I disagree with you, but I don't agree with you. I know exactly the common sense thing, the practicality would tell you, right, that this is it. But I think, first of all, we just live our lives every day. And it's because we are living our lives. When I joined the community in '78, I became the 7th member of the community. So I've never known a big community. Certainly this is the smallest it's been. But I've also, again, last year alone, we had 2 serious candidates come in, both one man and one woman. And they stayed with us for almost a year. So I think that there's still a lot of hope and promise that people will come in. And it's not actually that people don't come in. I think there have been about 30 people join the community since I've been here. It's just they don't stay. I don't know. I think maybe if we started tying them up or imprisoning them, we might have a better success rate. But until we can get around that kind of issue, we just have to let people work out their own thing. And but I think I really, truly, not just think, I believe in my heart of hearts that this is going to go on, because I really do believe it is the truth. And I cannot see that it's not going to happen. You know, check back with me in 5 years. Maybe I'll have a different opinion. But at this point, I still feel there's a great deal of hope. And what are we doing to bring in new members? Well, the thing about Shakerism, I always say, is you can't go knock on people's door and say, hey, come and join our church. You know, don't come on Sundays. I want you there 7 days a week. I want you to give up everything and just follow the gospel of Christ as he says, go sell all you have, give it to the poor, come take up your cross and follow me. That has to be prompted by the Spirit. What we have to do is make sure that people know we're here. So we have a website, so we grant interviews, and we still publish literature, etc. So the people are going to be awakened in their own soul. We just have to let them know that it's a viable place for them to try that life experience and to try and see if they really do want to be a shaker. So that's what we do.
Did we have a question in the center of the room over here? I don't want to miss anyone. No, this gentleman over here, and then we'll take you down here.
I'm interested to know more about your activities in peacemaking and what things that you do or sponsor, and what is some of the response that you have to some of the issues that you hear about and see about on TV or in the world around you, that in a violent world?
Well, you know, if you just simply look at the news, it's so disheartening. You would almost want to have to give up. And the thing is, you can't, and you have to be peaceable first in your heart, and then let that spread out. So what that means is, in your everyday life, to try to bring forth the Christ Spirit as much as possible. So to be as kind as you can, to hold back your tongue when you don't need to say what you may want to think, and instead to just try to promote peace by being peaceable. Shakers don't really get involved in the world, and we never have, and in any great extent. We do still pretty much practice a separation between ourselves and the world. Even though we have to be in the world a lot more than we used to be, we still don't get that involved. We do not get involved in anything political. That comes right from the very beginnings, because we see that as being not as citizens of heaven. Mother always believed that we should pay taxes like any other citizen of the United States, and that's what we continue to do. But so far as supporting a political party or a political view, we do not do that, and we strive not to even speak about politics in the community, because there are people in the room there who will be able to tell you that when especially outsiders are here visiting and we have exchanges of ideas, it's not really good. It's very divisive. We can't get away from discussing religion, but we can get away from discussing politics, so we try to stay away from that. But in the larger sense of what do we do to support peace, it's mostly through our prayers, it's mostly through our daily actions that we do that, but we don't have a connection to the outside world or any organization therein for promoting the peace.
Okay, we have another question here.
Thank you, Brother Arnold, for taking time out today to speak with all of us. And you actually did touch on, that was my one question, of how you interacted with outside society and how you said you kind of separate yourself from the world. But since your society and the group that you're in is down to only 3 people, I was wondering, do you still have to do things like, I know it must be very difficult to grow many crops to support yourselves. Do you have to do things like go to the grocery store to buy certain items to basically just exist and to stay alive?
Oh, yeah. But, you know, we do grow as much as possible. But we also have to remember that even when there were thousands of Shakers, they always went to the store. And there are things that you just can't grow in certain climates, and so you have to do that, and we always have. And so we don't have a problem with that, except the pocketbook. That's about it. But we do try to be as self-sufficient as possible. We do raise a great deal of our own vegetables, and we have 19,000 apple trees, so there's never a lack of apples. We have beef cattle. We have sheep, which we do not eat the sheep. We keep them for the wool, and we also have pigs. So we put about 1,200 pounds of beef in the freezer a year, and approximately 600 pounds of pork. And we have a lot of friends who have chickens, so we don't have to have chickens to get the eggs, and which makes Sister Frances very happy, because in her youth we had 200 hens here, and the little girl, it was always the sister's job to take care of hens, and she hates them, and even to this day she doesn't want another living hen on the property. So.
Anyone else? Oh, got a couple here.
Well, I know there's just a wonderful heritage of Shaker music, and I wonder, is that still an important thing in your community?
Yay. Yay. We still sing quite a bit. Meeting is still primarily, I would think, singing. We open it up with 2 hymns, and almost always after every testimony there's a song that is pitched up and joined in with, and things start getting a little lagging in meeting, then you'll hear Sister Frances belt out another song just to pick it back up again. So we still do quite a bit of singing.
Paul, you have a question?
Hello, Brother Arnold. I'm still working on the broom making equipment, and Steve's been helping me. And I'm looking into patents. I'm looking into patents, and I think I have misinformation. Can you just explain, did the Shakers hold patents? Did they feel that some things they should patent, some things should be given to the world? How did that work? Were they patented under somebody's name, or was it all through Lebanon?
Okay, well, Shakers had differing views over time about patents, and at some stages they felt that they shouldn't have it because it smacked of monopoly. At other times they realized they were losing money, and Shakers, I know we're communists, but we're very capitalistic in our communism, and so we weren't going to lose money, and so they had it. And the patents were always held in individual names, and so there's a patent for the main shaker mower that was made here, for instance, under Hewitt Chandler, who developed it. And it's usually the person who came up with it who would hold the patent name. But being a shaker, they didn't derive any personal benefits from it, because once you become a member of the community, everything you have is the community's. So in the short and long of it, we did both. And there were like 100 and something patents that the Shakers took out and held. Some of it was in broom making equipment too.
Would any of that be up in the library?
Yay, we have copies. Jerry Grant's there. You could ask him though. I know Old Chatham has it as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We had a few more back here.
Hello, Brother Arnold. It's Walt Chura.
Peace, Walt.
Peace be with you, brother. I think what I'd like you to talk about relates to some of the other topics that other people have talked about, and that is a phenomenon that I call summer shakers, working off the idea of the winter shakers who used to lose their faith as soon as the spring came. But today you have your community just kind of blossoms with friends of the community who come because they want to experience the life for a certain period of time. They want to engage in the labors of the community, and I've come to call them summer shakers. I mean, people who will stay pretty much for the better part of the summer. I mean, I see that personally as an outreach that allows for the potential of new members, and I know it did happen with one particular member of the Friends of the Shakers that didn't continue, but there was an outreach there, And the other element of that would be the program that you were going to establish with Lenny being the director of what was the trustee's house and turning it into a kind of a retreat center. And I'm wondering how that's going.
Well, that's still in the process because Lenny is still director, number one. So we won't go on board in that capacity until July 1st. But, you know, we've had some success with running it as a retreat house in the past. You've brought a couple of groups here, as a matter of fact. And we had an association with a small ministry here in Maine as well that was Mennonites. And so it works for us, but the problem was that we didn't have enough people to help on our end, and that's why we gave it up. But having the opportunity of Lenny retiring gives us a new look at it to see how that's going to work. I think it will work well though, and so that's good. As for the summer shakers, well, you know, that is true, and we call them the summer family, and it's always been that way since the 1960s, where we have a big upsurge. A lot of them are young people, either like we used to have a group from MOFGA, the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, come, and they would spend the whole summer here helping with the gardens, and they lived with us as well and incorporated themselves into the life of the family. But also younger nieces and nephews of members of the community would come and spend time on the farm and help out. And then also just the occasional young person who was interested would come, and we used to hire, our guides were all high school students, so a lot of them, if they couldn't commute, they would come and stay with us as well. So it did bring in a great deal of vibrancy, I think, but brought in even more work. So these things have changed as we become middle-aged and fuddy-duddy in our ways about having too many people around to take care of. But I do also want to say there's a fallacy about winter shakers. Life in a shaker community during the winter was very hard. It was actually a lot better in the summer because there was a lot more food. Rather than have to have it rationed to make sure it was going to last you all winter long, you had the abundance of all the fresh stuff coming in. And there were people who were known to show up for things like asparagus season and strawberry season and corn season and things like that, and they would plan their visits around that. So I think it has much more to do with summer than it ever did with winter. And but we still have a lot of people, as you know, come to Maine in the summertime, and the house is usually full most of the time.
Good news. That's good news.
More questions? No? Okay. Over here. Who's good?
One last question about your music. Just a matter of curiosity. Sometime in the 1990s, which seems so long ago, the Boston Camerata produced a CD with shaker music, and the impression I got from the liner notes was that the Sabbath Day Lake community participated in the recording session. The question is, were you one of those people?
I was.
You were.
Well, and they made it right here in the meeting house, and we all sang on it. And then, in fact, we toured with them. We went to Tanglewood when they debuted it, and we were in Middletown, Connecticut. We were in Cambridge, Boston, Chicago, Vermont.
That's nice to know. Good.
Okay, anyone else? No? I have a question. I think there are 10 shaker museums, if I'm correct. I'm just curious about how you feel about the museums and your relationship with them. I know at Shaker Heritage Society we try to be very sensitive about the history that we present and to be accurate about it, and it's important that we incorporate the voice of those who live as Shakers today whenever we can. I know that's not always easy, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are about these museums and our efforts to preserve Shaker historic sites.
Well, I don't know. I think you have to take these things as individuals more than anything else, and we're more than happy to help people out, and it's good to know that there are places where our history is still being told, and in one way that's sort of a unexpected aspect of proselytizing for us, because the people, come into another place, and most likely they're going to go to your places more than they do here, because where we're located, we don't get the kind of foot trade that most other sites might get. And so it can serve as a stepping stone, and a lot of people want to know more and will go on to other places, or perhaps will come here because they know there are Shakers still in this village. So that's always a good thing. But anyways, we just look at it individually, and we're more than happy to help you, and we're very pleased when you ask for help too. That makes us also feel still relevant.
Yeah, well, I think that's something we should do more of, actually.
Well, thank you. We do too.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions, I just want to take a moment to thank Steve O'Connor for suggesting the idea for this discussion. I think it's been a wonderful opportunity. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoyed it too, Brother Arnold. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and God bless you all, and see some of you later, I'm sure.